Good morning, everyone. I hope you are having a fabulous Saturday. You will have to forgive all of this right here because let me tell you, we have been up since 1:30 and then again at 2:30 this morning with a sick kid. And so it has been a very interesting morning. But I'm going to keep this short just because I'm a mom duty, like I need to be taking care of her as well. But I had to come on here and talk about something that is very near and dear to my heart. And with the work that I was able to do with school districts this week, it was something that continually was brought up. And so I want to start by just kind of telling you about a story from my past. And I am a Halloween lover. I love Halloween. I love haunted houses. Ever since I was a young child, I mean, it was like my Uncle Joe and we would always go and find like these scary, crazy haunted houses. Well, when I was about 13 years old, my best friends and I decided to go to this haunted house in our hometown. So, anyone from Rice out here, if you know, you know. It was the best haunted house and we stinking loved it. And I remember my best friends and we were in a line and they were all boys. And then, so like, we're trying to act all tough and, they were all trying to be like, I got this, whatever. And we get underneath this old dilapidated carport. Like this house was, I want to say it was like a 1930s home. And it was all dilapidated. And I just remember my heart was pounding and I could feel their heartbeats and my breath is just heavy and I'm scared and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're about to do this. We're about to go in. You can hear the chainsaws going off. You can hear the screams and the banging on the doors. And I was just like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? And they finally let us in. We go underneath this carport with the hanging trash bags and we go into this makeshift cemetery. And we're in the backyard in this makeshift cemetery. And right before we get to the door to get into the house, this clown with a chainsaw starts coming running after us. I was like, oh my gosh, my friend James jumps on my back and he's like, ah, he's screaming like a girl. And we run inside. And, it was one of those moments where you're like, I don't want to be first because I don't want to go into the room first, but I don't want to be left behind. And it was just a whirlwind. Well, we finally make it out. And when we make it out, like our breath is heavy, we're laughing hysterically. We still hear the screams and the chainsaws. And then we look at each other, we're like, oh my gosh, let's do it again. And so as I'm telling you this story, I promise there is a purpose for it. I couldn't help but think that going through a haunted house is a lot like instructional coaching. And let me tell you why. We often will do scary things when we know we are still safe. So, as an instructional coach, when I am taking a teacher through a coaching cycle and asking them to be vulnerable, they're more likely to do it when they know that they are safe. There is a safety net. There's no real threat. And so I just want to come on here and kind of talk to you about my years of experience of providing feedback. And a lot of the coaches that I was able to work with all throughout this week, one of the things that continually was brought up was just the resistance to feedback. And I give this feedback. They talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk, or they just come up with an excuse not to use it. There's all these barriers. And I remind them it is a lot like going through a haunted house. Teachers might have a sense of fear, but they will follow through when they know they are safe. Earlier this week, I was a guest on a podcast, Coaching the Whole Educator by Becca Silver. Great podcast. Go and listen to it if you have an opportunity. And I loved one of the things that she mentioned. She said that fear is a form of protection. Resistance is a form of protection from fear. And even looking at Elena Aguilar's work and with Bright Morning, she talks about the various masks that we wear. And one of them is from fear. Like when we are fear, we put on a mask. And our teachers need to know that they're safe. And I'm not talking about safe as in, oh, you have to be just the nicest person or the most trustworthy person. You have to know all my, you can keep all my secrets. Okay, that's another component of it. But I'm talking about safety as in, if this goes awry, and if I am not necessarily as successful, is it going to put more work on me? Because I'm already exhausted and I'm already overwhelmed. Safety as in, man, I don't want to look bad because I am an adult with multiple degrees. And if this doesn't work, it's going to fall back on me. And I'm scared about that. Like there are all these different fears that we put on masks for when we don't know what to do. And so instead of taking it in, so if you are an instructional coach or a principal who has been providing feedback and you're just concerned, maybe you're even taking it personally, don't. Because remember that resistance is a form of protection. So I want to give you a couple examples. I wrote them down this morning. You'll have to, again, forgive me. My brain is mush. Like dealing with a sick kid all morning has been a little crazy. But you'll know the life. You know what it is. So I did want to talk about some of my biggest feedback fails. And one of them, especially when I first started coaching. So principals, instructional coaches, if you are new to giving feedback, I want you to avoid these words. Well, when I was in the classroom, in my old school district, just don't say it. Don't. Because the moment you remove yourself from their reality, they're going to look at you. They're going to roll their eyes. They're going to be like, I'm tired of hearing that. That ain't the way we do it here. That's not the way I do it. So avoid those things. And I wasn't necessarily one who would say like, well, when I was in the classroom or I did this, but I was someone who loved to offer suggestions. I wanted to fix everyone's problems and I wanted to just appear knowledgeable because I was like, oh, I have to prove that I'm knowledgeable. So I wanted to offer all the suggestions. And I would walk into a classroom and I would know exactly in my mind, or I would think I knew exactly in my mind what they needed to do to fix the situation or to make it stronger or to tighten things up. But throwing suggestions at people, you're wasting your breath. And let me tell you why. And this is what I found out through this experience. I would offer suggestions and it would either be misinterpreted or it would just they wouldn't find the relevance in it. They wouldn't find the need for it. So giving all these suggestions are not necessarily the best way to go. Suggestions get ignored, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not intentionally. Wow, can't talk. The second mistake that I made when it came to feedback is I was the one who did the heavy lifting. As an instructional coach, instructional leader, principal, do you ever find yourself doing this? You see that someone has a problem, so you're going to maybe come up with the solution. You're going to put all the things together. You're going to write the plans. You're going to make the folders. You're going to do everything for them. And then when it comes to execution, they might use it because they're like, oh man, he or she put in a lot of work. So I'm going to do it this one time, but never again. And I want you to think about that. When we are doing the heavy lifting for the teachers that we're coaching, they're not doing any learning. And I found myself doing the heavy lifting because one, I was a control freak and it had to be my way. Be honest with yourself. Are you this person where you're the instructional leader and it's like, everyone must operate the way I operate. No. Again, I'm going to quote Becca Silver from The Whole Educator. She ends her podcasts with, don't treat people the way you want to be treated. Treat people the way they want to be treated. We're all different. We all operate differently. And so if you're the one who's doing the heavy lifting, you're the one who's doing the learning or the reinforcing of your strategies. It's the same thing that we talk about when we're teaching students, our young scholars. Whoever is doing the heavy lifting is doing the learning. That's why lecturing for 45 minutes is not effective. And so the same is true, coaches and principals. Stop doing the work for others. You have to release control. If you are someone who is a control freak, you are not developing independence among those you lead. Strong and true leaders develop the capacity of others. I'm going to say that again. Strong leaders develop the capacity of others. So I want you to look at those that you lead. Have you developed their capacity? Have you strengthened their independence? Any person that you are trying to coach, has their independence grown? And you might be thinking, well, no, not necessarily, but they haven't been taking any of my suggestions. Remember, we don't just give suggestions. We cannot just talk at people. So I'm going to get to how you flip it. I'm going to get to how my one secret, my number one secret. All right. The other problem that I see a lot of coaches doing, and I did it too, I lived it, is avoiding teachers or avoiding people that you don't want to provide feedback to, because maybe you're just so frustrated that they haven't been listening, or you don't want to overwhelm them. You're like, my presence overwhelms them. No, when you make yourself a fixture in their life and you just make yourself a fixture in their classrooms, they'll get used to it. At first, they might get a little nervous, but they'll get used to it. And this is one thing I remember at the beginning of every school year, I used to think, oh, I'm not going to go into classrooms this first week. They don't want me. They don't need me. And that was the wrong mentality to have. I had to learn to switch it. I need to be in their classrooms from day one, from the very first day. And so then I made it a point to be in teachers' classrooms every single day the first week. Like, I want to be in everyone's classrooms, even if it is just for 5 minutes. But that first week of school, I'm going to get into everybody's classroom. Am I coaching and leaving feedback and doing all that? No. However, if you want to develop trust and you want to develop just a coaching culture, you need to be present every day. Principals, presence matters. Coaches, presence matter. Principals, your coach's presence matters. So I'm going to implore you, do not overload your coaches with duties and meetings and class coverage. If you want tier 1 instruction to strengthen and you are frustrated with the lack of teacher growth, make sure that your coach is able to spend at least 70% of their day with teachers in the classroom. So that means no class coverage unless absolutely necessary. That means no lunch duty. They don't need to be doing lunch duty. They need to be in classrooms. They don't need to be, doing all of these other things. Like, don't make them your, testing coordinator or your RTI. Like, don't make them those things, because that's going to take away so much time. So much time. Your instructional coaches are there to strengthen tier 1 instruction. And to do that, they need time to be in the classrooms with teachers. I digress. I totally went on a tangent. Forgive me. But hey, we're going to move on. Now I'm going to go into my secret. So I talked to you about my fails. The 3 things. Oh, and I'm dropping stuff. The 3 things that I did that just did not work was offer a lot of suggestions, or I did the heavy lifting, or I just stayed away because I didn't want to overwhelm people. Those are 3 mistakes. I can't do that. What I can do, this is what I need to do. Coaches, principals, anyone who's providing feedback and asking teachers to grow, you need to build safety. You need to create trust to where if they're going to go through the haunted house, they still know that they are safe. They still know that they're going to be okay at the other end of it. And let me share one, just one. There's many. Not saying many. There's several other ways to do this. But my favorite strategy to use that does develop a partnership relationship and trust is question more than I explain. And I want you to think about the last coaching conversation that you had with someone. Did you provide more suggestions than you asked questions? And I'm not talking about on a form. There are a million and one walkthrough forms that ask questions. I have them too. I own them. Like one of my giveaways are note cards that ask reflective questions. I'm talking about when you are sitting one-on-one with a teacher, are you asking more questions than you are providing suggestions? And I'm not talking about leading questions. You can't ask leading questions to get them to where hey, I want you to say this specific thing. However, you can ask reflective questions. So for instance, Thursday, I was in a school district working with some amazing coaches. They are phenomenal. And let me tell you, I stinking love every time I'm in the school district, I just get so excited. And they were super vulnerable, which I was so grateful for. And they brought in observation videos and they watched them, but it wasn't to provide feedback for the teacher. It was to rehearse coaching conversations and give feedback to one another. They even recorded their coaching conversations. It was beautiful. Well, one of the questions that I kept getting was, okay, well, what if a teacher is watching their video or the teacher isn't necessarily seeing the things that I'm wanting them to see? What do you do? Like, what if they're saying that they're a 10 all across the board? Oh yeah, I was great. That was awesome. This was this. This was this. So principals, coaches, have you been with that teacher where it's like, oh, I'm the best. That was awesome. And it's either one, because they have a very different vision of reality, or 2, they're wearing a mask and they are scared. And so this is their form of resistance because they are protecting themselves. So one thing, instead of offering all of these suggestions, because they're telling me right now that they're resistant to me by doing that, if they're saying they're wonderful across the board. So instead of offering suggestions and scaring them even more or overwhelming them even more, I'm going to start by asking them to create a wish list before we ever talk about the observation. And I'm going to ask, hey, okay, teacher, I'm going to call you Mr. Ring Light because I have a ring light in front of me. Mr. Ring Light, before we get started, I just want you to describe for me your ideal learning environment. To explain to me, what are the teachers doing? What are the students doing? And they go and they give me this wish list. I'm writing it down. And then I ask them, tell me more about what that looks like. Tell me more. I'm always, tell me more, tell me more. And if they're giving me like some surface level questions, then I'm going to dive into like their biggest headaches, because I'm sure at this time, especially this part of the year, you have heard some of their headaches that, well, I hear you, I remember last week you were talking about how students weren't turning in their work and that they were always trying to sneak out their cell phones. Or I heard you say that you're just so tired of the disrespect. Tell me what that disrespect looks like. Define that for me. What would respect look like? So start using their language to get them to draw out this wish list. And now that they have their wish list, then you can talk about what they're seeing in their own classroom and what are the similarities and differences. What's already going well? Hone in on that. Ask why it's going well. What moves are you making that are creating this? You always want to expand on what they're doing well and focus on that so they can just make it stronger over and over. And then when they're looking at the differences between their ideal, that's the 10. And then they are pretty much telling you, oh, I wasn't at a 10. I wasn't at my best. This wasn't the best learning environment or learning experience. And so I want you in your next coaching conversation to question more than you explain. That's the goal. Because when we are questioning, we are positioning the teacher as the expert. They are. They're the expert in their own journey. You are not the expert in their journey. Here's what's going to happen if you try to position yourself as the expert in their journey. They're going to resist you. They're not going to follow through. You're going to kill yourself doing all of this work over and over and doing all of these things for them, and they're not going to take it. But when you position themselves as the expert and they can see this beautiful vision, and here is the magic pill to get to this, like they're creating the magic pill for themselves, that, my friend, is when feedback will become action. So choose one person, whether it is a principal. If you are a principal, maybe you're coaching instructional coaches, maybe you're coaching other principal APs. Maybe you are an instructional coach coaching teachers. Maybe you are a mentor teacher coaching a brand new teacher. Whatever your position, I just want you to choose one person. And one person that you're struggling with, not your BFF that you're coaching and they're making great progress. I want you to choose someone that you are trying to grow that is experiencing resistance. They're about to go through a haunted house and they don't know if they want to go through it or not. They need to know that they're safe. One way to know that they're safe is by being positioned as the expert in their own journey. They are the decision maker, not you. They get to choose their path. They're not being forced through a different path. They're the decision maker. Now, are there times when, you need a little pushing? That's a whole different conversation. So this is what I want you to do, my friends. I want you to choose that one person, schedule a coaching conversation with them next week. Put it on their calendar, put it on your calendar. And I want you to observe yourself, whether really record your coaching conversation or just out of body experience, make it a point to ask questions for them to come up with their own solutions more than you explain. And then I want you to come to the comments to this particular episode, and I want you to tell me how it goes. So if you were like, Alyssa, I'm so bad with coming up with questions on the spot, I do have a free resource. Go to my social media. You know what? I'm going to tag it in this episode too. I'll put it on my YouTube channel in the notes. There is a free lead magnet. I've had it out for about a week now. It's called Inquire to Inspire. And it's just some of my favorite questions that I like to ask to facilitate reflection. So I'm going to put that in the show notes. You have a wonderful Saturday, my friend. I'm going to go take care of a sick kid. And I hope you have a fabulous Saturday. And I will talk to you later. Bye, everyone.